Greeting, Church of all nations. It's so good to be with you again today. What a week it's been for our community and for our nation with the death of George Floyd. It's been the catalyst for protests and riots across our country. Even some of our church members have participated in some of the protests down in Denver. As a Church of all nations, our heart breaks for what is happening in our country right now. We are a church of all colors. We are a church of all tongues. We are a church of all nations. We are one race. We are the human race. And so we have the one thing that everyone needs. We have Jesus. And what we need to know today is that Jesus said we need to love your neighbor as yourself. And I want us to really sincerely ask this question. Are we doing this as a nation? Are we loving each other as ourselves? Are we loving our neighbors of color? Are we really loving them? Are we loving our neighbors across the street that look different than us or that talk different than us? Are we truly living our lives like we should be? For those of you that participated in the protests, I want you to know that I am proud of you. I am proud of you for exercising your right to protest because every life has value, regardless of color, regardless of age. And so as we move forward, we need to understand that we are a church of all nations. God doesn't see color on our skin. He created the color on our skin. Jesus had more color in his skin than many in America. And having visited Israel, I can guarantee you that Jesus wasn't white. So what do we do? What can we do? First, I think we can look at Scripture. So what I want us to do today is just take a few moments, get right with God, spend some time in prayer, sing some songs of worship, read some Bible verses, whatever you need to do to prepare yourself for this message this morning or today whenever you watch this video. So take some time now to get yourself right with God and to prepare yourself. Let's take a look at Acts chapter 25. We're going to look at the first 12 verses today. Acts chapter 25. So Festus, having arrived in the province, you remember from last week that there was this changing of the guard with the Roman leadership. And so Festus, having arrived in the province, 3 days later, he went to Jerusalem from Caesarea. And in verse 2, it says, "And the chief priests and the leading men of the Jews brought charges against Paul, and they were urging him, requesting a concession against Paul, that he might have him brought to Jerusalem, at the same time setting an ambush to kill him on the way." See, what we need to see here is within a few days of Festus becoming the leader, he went to Jerusalem. He went to check out Jerusalem. And here's what he found out. As soon as he got there, the people in charge, they were after Paul. They were ready to arrest Paul. They were ready to kill Paul. They were plotting against him. See, the chief priests and the leaders, they wanted to have a meeting with Festus. See, they were after Paul. They were once again conspiring, but instead of a bunch of men taking vows not to eat and drink until Paul was dead, now the leaders, most likely the Sadducees, were ready to get rid of Paul. They were getting ready to ambush him on the way back to Jerusalem. See, what is it in our hearts that makes us wish for the death of others? What is it about our hearts? Why is it such a hard issue that we want to see people die? Why do we watch the videos on the internet? Why do we stop at car crashes to see what happened? See, we watch these types of videos. We watch videos of cops killing black men, or we watch videos of terrorists cutting the heads off Christians. What is it about our hearts that causes us to want to watch these types of videos? Why do we slow down at car crashes? Why do we pull up videos and watch this take place? See, it's something in our hearts that's causing this. What happened was absolutely wrong. No life should ever be taken the way that George Floyd lost his life. And so for those of you that stand up against it, I am 100% with you. See, the Jewish leaders, they were conspiring to kill Paul. They conspired to kill Jesus, they conspired to kill Stephen, and now they're conspiring to kill Paul. They wasted no time getting in front of the new leader, the new Roman leader. And so once again, they were going to bring charges against Paul, and they wanted Festus to hand Paul over. instead of having him participate in a Roman tribunal. Look at verse 4 and 5. Festus then answered that Paul was being kept in custody at Caesarea, and that he himself was about to leave shortly. Therefore he said, let the influential men among you go there with me, and if there's anything wrong about the men, or about the man, let them prosecute him. See, most likely Festus didn't know that there's a plot to kill Paul. Most likely he didn't know that that was what was going to happen, but what he did know was that this was a way to get in good with the Jews. This was a way to get in good with the Jewish leaders. He was going to try Paul in Caesarea rather than hand Paul over to the Jews. He wanted to try Paul himself. Look at verse 6 with me. After he had spent not more than 8 or 10 days among them, he went down to Caesarea, and on the next day he took a seat on the tribunal and ordered Paul to be brought to him. After Paul arrived, the Jews who had come down from Jerusalem stood around and bringing many and serious charges against him, which they could not prove. While Paul said in his own defense, I have committed no offense either against the law of the Jews or against the temple or against Caesar. See, I want you to see what's happening in this scene. Festus takes a seat on the judgment seat, and he's getting ready to try Paul, and the Jews surround him. They start yelling all these charges that they're bringing up against Paul. And they're bringing up some serious charges, one of which would have led to his death, right? And that was what their plan was. They were trying to get Paul to be killed one way or the other. Think about this. Paul is fighting for his life. They have been plotting his murder. They're getting ready to kill him on the way back to Jerusalem. They're holding nothing back. The Bible says they're bringing up terrible charges, most likely the same charges that they brought up on him in chapter 23 and 24, accusing Paul of breaking the law, stirring up riots, and defiling the temple by bringing in a Gentile. The same accusations. But look at Paul's defense. I have committed no offense either against the law of the Jews or against the temple or against Caesar. Paul was basically saying they're lying. They're not telling the truth. They're bringing up false accusations. Look at verse 9. But Festus, wishing to do the Jews a favor, answered Paul and said, are you willing to go up to Jerusalem and stand trial before me on these charges? See, Festus was doing two things. One, he wanted to gain favor with the Jews. It says specifically in the Bible that that was his intent. His intent was to gain favor with the Jews. Number two, he was going to turn Paul over to him. That was his goal. He did not want to have to deal with this issue. He wanted to gain favor with the Jews. He wanted to turn Paul over to the Jews and let them take care of it. See, there's only the difference between doing what is right and trying to gain favor with criminals. They were literally plotting the murder of Paul, and Festus wanted to gain favor with them. He asked Paul, are you willing to go up to Jerusalem and stand trial before me on these charges? See, this was all a plot to smooth over the situation with the Jews. Festus was playing politics. See, do we see this type of game playing in politics today in our own government? How is it possible for our senators and congressmen to become millionaires when they work for the people? What is it with the lobbyists in American culture? How many politicians have been busted playing favorites, plotting with the people of influence? See, the politics haven't changed in 2,000 years. People in power still pander to the crowds. And that's what Festus was doing. He was playing right into the hands of the Jews. So look how Paul responds in verse 12. Or in verse 10, I'm sorry. But Paul said, I am standing before Caesar's tribunal, where I ought to be tried. I have done no wrong to the Jews, as you also very well know. If then I am a wrongdoer and have committed anything worthy of death, I do not refuse to die. But if none of those things is true of which these men accuse me, no one can hand me over to them. I appeal to Caesar. Then when Festus had conferred with his council, he answered, you have appealed to Caesar? To Caesar you shall go. See, Paul knew the stakes. They wanted Paul's head, they wanted him dead, and he was being put on trial just for that. And Festus knew that he wasn't guilty of a crime. He certainly wasn't guilty of something that was deserving of death. See, the Romans were really good at inflicting the maximum amount of pain in death. If we just look at the cross as an example of this. But Paul didn't do anything that warranted the death penalty. Paul realized he was running out of options. He pulled the only card he had left in his hand. He pulled out the Caesar card. He said, I want to appeal to Caesar. Now, there's not much that we know about this type of an appeal. There's not a lot that we know. Not much is known about this type of appeal. Most of it is what we know about it comes from Luke's account, that this is one of the only surviving documents of someone appealing to Caesar. And so what did he do? He got Festus off the hook. See, no longer was Festus in with the Jews. Now Festus could turn it over to Caesar, and now it would be on Caesar to see what happens with the Jews. Now it was up to Caesar if Paul lived or died. If Caesar allowed Paul to live, then the Jews would be upset, but they wouldn't be upset with Festus. They'd be upset with Caesar. See, and that was an easy way to get off the hook. And this is the way things go, right? People always passing the buck on their responsibility. So what are we going to do? What are we going to do with this situation? What are we going to do with our country and the state that it's in? Will the government pass the buck? Will the people riot? Will the people make attempts on the lives of the police? Wherever you land on protests versus rioting, people are the same regardless of the century. Excuse me, the people wanted Paul's head and they were plotting to kill him. And I'm sure that there are people around today that would like the officer to be released and turned over to the crowd. See, our hearts haven't changed in 2,000 years. But here's the deal. All of us should live our lives with a good conscience towards God and towards others. If you want to protest, then protest, but don't riot. Keep a good conscience before God and man. See, I can't imagine the pain that some of you have experienced. I can't imagine the pain that some of you have personally gone through. I can't imagine the pain that some of you are experiencing right now. But here's what I want you to know. I love you and I support you. You are my family. We are a church of all nations. We are a church of all colors. We are a church of all tongues. We are a church of all types. It doesn't matter. We are a church of all nations. We are one race. We are the human race. Every single life has value. We were all created in the image of God. See, and that's what I want you to hear this week. I love you so much. I stand with you. I can't imagine the pain that some of you are experiencing right now, but I want you to know that I love you and I'm in your corner. And if there's anything I can do to support you right now, please let me know. I love all of you so much. I'll see you again next week. God bless.